All right. I'll say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you happen to be as you're watching this or viewing it in some future point in time. This is Tuesdays with Peter, and I'm Peter. We just finished up a series on positively brilliant self-mastery a couple of weeks back, and last week we began a series on the inspired learning model. It's a learning model, and we're on chapter 1, but week number 2 of that for this week. And so welcome. For those of you that are formal trainers, educators, facilitators of learning, or informal, doesn't matter. This is applicable to parenting as much as it is for corporate trainers or professional educators at the grade school level or high school level or university level. It's been used in all of those different places over the last 25 years. And inspired learning is bringing an individual back to their natural way of learning, their natural way of absorbing new information and applying that new information into their lives. It's a paradigm shift, and the paradigm shift is moving from an environment of critique where the facilitator of learning, I use that terminology, by the way, facilitator of learning is a teacher, is a corporate trainer, is an adult facilitator of learning, of whatever ongoing learning is happening to take place. Facilitator of learning is a terminology that I use for all of that. So the facilitator of learning's focus is, what did the student, the learner, get right, as opposed to what they still need to work on, learn, go back and figure out that they got wrong. The significance of this is monumental in its respect that learning happens faster. The material gets absorbed faster by the learner when the facilitator points out what the learner got right, what they got correct, what they're doing correctly, depending upon what's going on in the learning environment at the time and what focus is being highlighted. The reason for this is human beings are innately inquisitive. Innately. You cannot stop learning. I believe that the educational system, mostly that's practiced worldwide, that is based on a critique-based learning model, retards, in other words, slows down the learning process, whereas the inspired learning re-embraces the individual's natural way of learning, of being excited about learning, being excited about a topic that they're interested in learning more about. Now, if you follow that line of thought, by acknowledging the learner for what they got right, it reinforces, yes, learner, hip, hip, hooray, hallelujah. That is exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about blank, mathematics, about learning how to be a better leader, learning how to be a professional coach, learning how to cook a meal, whatever the learning is all about. By reinforcing the things that they got right, it goes, oh, I'm getting it. So it's actually a level of encouragement. Good. Yeah. So let me learn more. Right. Let me try again, kind of idea. It also is a sense of, there's so many different things that a learner needs to learn about any particular topic to become masterful at it. And in the initial stages of learning, the learner is so overwhelmed with these different competencies that they have to learn that they don't know enough at that early stage of learning, that This one was good, this one was good, this one was good, this one, okay, they missed that one altogether. This one needs developmental work, etc. They cannot distinguish what they're doing well and what they're not doing well as it relates to that particular topic. When the facilitator takes the time to acknowledge them for, wow, Peter, you did that really great. You did this, you did this, you did this. Keep up the good work in those areas. And now maybe this one here needs development, right? The learner gets bolstered, like, wow, I'm getting it. I am actually learning this subject matter, this topic, this new way of doing something. So let me try again. So you'll hear me say over the next series of 8 or 9 weeks that we're going to be focusing on the inspired learning model. Learning initially is messy. What I mean by messy is that it's very confusing. It's like, well, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. I'm not sure if that was right or not right. The facilitator is there to guide them to, wow, you're doing so many things well. This. Right. That's second principle of learning is that it's iterative. Very rarely is anybody hear something for the first time and be able to do it perfectly. Now there's savants that, you hear on YouTube that's, 6 years old and they can play Chopin perfectly and on a piano, right? It's like, I don't know how that happens, but obviously gifted. Most of the rest of the population, when we're learning a new topic, is very confusing, and I have to try once. Okay, all right. I'm excited about learning this, but I'm not really good at it yet. I know that much. I try a second time, I get a little bit better at it. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and so on, number of times to become more and more masterful. So it's iterative. I learn a little bit at a time, and it builds upon itself. And I have to repeat. I have to practice. If you think of a masterful surgeon that is in a very delicate operation, he or she did not do that the first time that they tried it. So over the last 15 years, they have gotten better and better and more masterful at that piece of work through trial and error, through trying it again, doing it again, maybe being overseen by a master surgeon that teaches them, okay, so now if you use this technique, you can bypass this particular artery or vessel, or what you don't want to nick that with your scalpel, etc., etc. But it takes many, many tries to become more masterful. So again, coming back to the principle of, if I'm in a critique-based environment, I am going to be told what I didn't do well. And it robs me of the opportunity, me, the facilitator of learning, me, the learner, to solidify those things that I have learned. And I've done well. In fact, some of them I may have done very, very well. But because of the confusion of the new learner or the new topic, I don't know that it's a learner. I just don't. You can think of another analogy that I often use is a golfing or some sort of a sports, whatever it might be. Right. So in golfing, I'm not a golfer, but I've been around golfers for most of my life. And a new golfer, there's a backswing that they have to hold the club, and then they follow through. They have to keep their eye on the ball, right, and then follow through. They're not sure what part of their body is working properly, positioned properly. The golf pro, again, that's teaching them, facilitator of learning in that regard, will typically be coming from the old school of critique. And, so what I've heard all around a lot in those golf lessons as a young kid doing caddying, in other words, carrying the bag around for those the golfers, is you took your eye off the ball. right? That's why you either missed the ball altogether or it went off some direction you didn't want it to go in. Not helpful. Now, eventually they'll get it, but they may have done 14 other things in the swing itself that was beautiful, that was graceful, that was masterful. But the golf pro lost the opportunity to share with that student, right, beginning golfer, to share those things and to re-solidify those things up front by only focusing on the one thing that they did wrong. You took your eye off the ball. You took your eye off the ball. Keep your eye on the ball. All right. So next time they keep their eye on the ball and they hit it, but there may have been, like I say, 15 other things that they did do well. That doesn't get. Then they'll pick out the next thing that they didn't do. Okay. So now you have to, follow through. All right. Because that's the next thing that they didn't do well. It's an incredibly arduous way of learning. So today we talk about the first element. Let me go through the elements here. Let me get this organized here. And let's try this one. Ta-da. All right, so what we have here are the 7 elements: the facilitator, the subject matter, the physical environment, the inspired learner, the standards of presence, the integration, and finally, inspiration. So this week, we're talking about the facilitator, the inspired learning facilitator. The facilitator creates an inspired learning environment and acts as the guide during the learning process for the inspired learners who are attracted to a chosen subject matter. Now, subject matter is just the topic that we're looking at. It could be leadership, it could be needlepoint, it could be a sport, it could be woodworking, one of my favorites, learning how to use a new tool, learning how to work with a different type of wood that I haven't worked with before. Whatever that subject matter is what I am attracted to as the learner. Now, there's the question I often get with this model is, does it work in compulsory learning? Compulsory learning means that, okay, because you're 10 years old, you have to be in 3rd grade or whatever grade that is nowadays. You have to learn mathematics or arithmetic. You have to learn the language of the country that you're in. You have to learn, geography and so on and so forth. And it's mandatory. It's obligatory. You have to be there. You don't have a choice. Now, as you grow up as an adult, you will attend sensitivity training or delegation training or some other kind of training in your corporate job. You do not have a choice. No, you can't miss it. No, you can't send somebody else to learn it for you. Bring back the Cliff Notes. You must go. Does this work in those areas? It does, but it's less engaging. I'm going to just say that. Where this accelerates the learning magnificently is when an individual is curious about wanting to be in that learning space, that classroom, that Zoom room, that space of learning, because they have curiosity of wanting to be better at blank, better at delegation, better at acknowledging, better at recognizing opportunities for the strengths of the people that report to you, whatever that might be. Or coaching is in my case, what I've been teaching for the last 26 years, professional coaches, learning how to coach. When the individual is excited about the topic, and you use this methodology, you can expect greater learning in a factor of 200 to 300% more than the classic critique-based learning. I've had corporate leaders that are trainers. I can think of one fellow in particular that went through our coaches training back, I don't know, I'm gonna say 15 years ago now. And he was a corporate trainer. And he was a corporate trainer, an excellent corporate trainer, but used the old critique-based method. And then he switched over to the inspired learning method, doing the exact same kind of work. I think it was he taught safety, corporate safety, or safety principles in his corporation, right? And it was a mandatory course that all the managers and supervisors had to go through. And he started using this model. And he said it was dramatic. It was so dramatic that people were starting to have fun at this obligatory training. They started being more engaged. They were more actively involved in the learning process, so much so that they were making noise in the training room and other people going, what the heck is going on in there? It's like somebody was having a birthday party type of energy that was coming out, and they were looking through the window and going, what's happening in there? Because this is very strange for this to be happening in this corporate training with this particular corporate trainer. And it just changed the dynamic of the learning for everybody that was involved. So yes, absolutely spectacular. All right. Facilitator brings a focus to a specific subject matter. Subject matter is just, what's the topic? What's the learning all about? Is it corporate? Is it safety? Is it coaching? Is it cooking? Is it woodworking? Is it, how to build a architecture? Something more in terms of architecture or medicine or what have you. What's the topic of which with which they have a level of mastery? So the facilitator facilitates what they're masterful about. They don't try to train somebody in something that they're not masterful about or have a passion for. Number two, opens doors for inspired learners to connect with their innate knowingness about this topic. Now, here's an interesting theory that it's my working theory. It's one that I've observed for the last 25 years. People that are excited about learning something, whatever that topic might be, already have an innate learning and understanding about that particular topic. Now, when I say innate, that they were born with it. There is a I'm going to say intangible, but it's not quite intangible or invisible. But when they get engaged into a topic that they are excited about, it taps into a inner knowingness. They have understanding around this topic that surprises them. And it can come out verbally, it can come out in the demonstration, it can come out in the acceleration of their own learning, and it surprises both me as a facilitator of learning as well as the student of learning, the inspired learner, we call it. And when that can happen, there's magic. We're going to talk more about that in terms of the evolution of that and how it shows itself during a learning process. Number three, creates an atmosphere of equality among inspired learners and the facilitator. So even though I am a master at coaching, there is an equality that I bring into the learning space that says to the learners, you've got this. There's so many elements of this that you already know. And there's an equality amongst the learners in the room, whether it's a virtual room like this or it's a physical room. And so there's not a sense of hierarchy. Okay, let's put the smart people up front and let's put the laggards back of the room because they're just going to slow us up. No. It's treating everybody in the room as a capable learner. And a learner that is excited about learning more about blank. Yeah. Finally, build safety by demonstrating acceptance and acknowledgement. Acknowledgement we've talked a lot about already. It's a key factor in this whole inspired learning concept. And accepting them for where they're at in their learning journey. So the facilitator has a huge responsibility of beginning to create this environment of welcoming, accepting, celebrating, and with a mindset of, I am here to witness, to be a witness of your magnificence. That was awesome. Did everybody hear that? What she just said? That was just freaking awesome. Can you say that again? And she repeats whatever she just said. Yes, that's exactly bang on bullseye what we're talking about in this particular area of this part of the learning. I'm going to stop it here momentarily and just get any feedback or questions from, I see Saraswati and Vivek and Sunny has joined us today. Does this make sense? I know each of you have gone through this, my learning environment that I created back when you were learning about coaching. What strikes you as important or an experience that you had in this learning environment that we've touched upon already from the facilitators, myself and my co-facilitator at the time? Anything that you want to share? Saraswati?
Yeah, what I'd like to share is, for me, focusing on the positive makes it grow, is something that I kept hearing you talk about, and that's something that I've been implementing, and more so with my child. And the dynamics has completely changed, and that's something that was even part of the pre-work that was required before we started part one. So this bit just reminds me of that all over again. That's what I'm taking away as a key takeaway.
Yeah, excellent. And so you mentioned a change of dynamic. Can you articulate that a little bit better in terms of what would have been with your daughter and what it is because of that shift in you as the facilitator of learning, now known as the parent?
Celebrating what's working vis-a-vis just being a critic all the time. I guess the entire atmosphere, conversation, and it's typically related to, and she's all of 8. So it's typically related to learning a new subject or learning a new sport. And there's always this apprehension of, oh, I can't do it, I want to give up. And, once you start focusing on the areas wherein she's picking up, which could be, something as simple as badminton or even what we went through with cycling, I just feel that celebrating those little wins gave her the confidence and the positive attitude to want to come back to it, even though she was failing, but want to try and do better. And I think just looking at it, approaching it differently was easier for me to get her to win, vis-a-vis just kind of letting her succumb to the failure of it not being possible. Wow. And giving up on it. Wow. Yeah, I mean, we've had like a lot of hobbies that we've experimented with in the past. And I think a lot of them just fell through the cracks because one didn't feel motivated enough to want to continue. I guess the key word I'm taking away is motivation, because the positiveness just allowed for that self-motivation to happen. And I think that's largely come out of my coaching journey and my learning, which, and for me, the easiest person to implement this with has been with her always. So huge growth for me and for her through this.
Wow. Wow. Well, on behalf of her, thanks, Mom.
Oh, thank you, Peter.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Okay, so this is an 8-year-old, obviously learning all kinds of things all at the same time at this stage of life. and the attitude of mom and the inspired learning facilitator is a key element of creating this environment of you're doing it. You're not doing it all. We know that. It's not masterful yet. We know that. Everybody knows that in the room. But I can celebrate her for this one item, or I can celebrate her for this. And then that then generates within her natural way of learning, wanting to learn, having an appetite for learning. I'm getting it. And I know there's more to learn because I fell over on the bicycle, or I did this and trying to get, the drawing and whatever, but I'm getting it. And so there is it's why we call it inspired learning, because when an individual is inspired, it comes from the inside of them. Now, external reinforcement, yes, got it. But it touches something inside the individual learner that says, okay, I can do this, as opposed to, this is too hard. I'm not getting it. I need to give up on this. I can't, I'm not being as good as my brother or my sister or my neighborhood friend or somebody on the playground. They're good at it, I'm not. Then they go into a downward spiral, and again, slows down the learning process, that I am not as smart, I am not as physically able, I am not as astute. Now, they don't say that word at 8 years old, but that feeling is inside their body, as opposed to, of course you can do this. You already did this. You did this really well. Woohoo! And they get excited. And then they bring that new positive energy that coming from the inside of them, because that's what I trigger as a facilitator. That's bang on, beautiful, spectacular, awesome. You got your hand up again, Saraswati. Something else?
Yes, I wanted to make a special mention. I started this coaching journey when I lived in another city, and through part 1 and part 2, after that, I've moved locations before part 3 happened. And it's been through COVID, new city, no friends, new school, new environment. And I think I was able to support her positively, through all of it, because of the fact that we could look at it from the positive lens, because there were a lot of things that didn't work for us. There was a lot of meltdowns, but it was easier. And I think I managed to cross the bridge smoothly with her, only because I keep going back to I used the standard of presence as a lens, and helped myself and her and the house focus on the bits that were working for us, and celebrating that and showing gratitude for it. And I guess that's kind of helped me and her and my husband, all of us, transition smoothly to a new city.
Wow.
So thank you.
Wow. Well, thank you for, you're welcome. I received that. And you're the one that did it. And you applied it to all this. Obviously, you applied it to coaching. I know that personally, because I saw you blossom in that arena. But
thank you.
The thing that you're just touching on is, I'm bringing it into moving a household. No mean feat. Working with a child that's 8 years old, bringing that attitude in with your marriage. I mean, there is an attitude that I recognize in our students that have gone through this personally and have benefited from it in terms of their own accelerated growth in this particular subject matter of how do I become a professional coach, right? Got it. But the principles of everything that you just shared is so important in the rest of life. It becomes a life skill to be able to do this, and to reverse that it seems like it's a universal, global, every educator, every teacher, every parent has sort of learned from, I'm going to say this in an I statement, as I was growing up and I was witnessing education, educators felt they had the responsibility to point out what I was doing wrong so that I could go back and study it. And that did not support me. That held I hated school. Bottom line, I hated school. I was not an A student. I was, anyhow, I won't get into that. But to change that enculturation of I have to point out what's wrong in order for the student to go back and study that to get it right is one of the huge barriers to doing the work that we're talking about right now. And reverse that to a different mindset that says, now, as a facilitator of learning, in whatever capacity I'm in, I want to change my mindset to pointing out what went wrong to pointing out what went right. That switch, for some people, takes a long time because they've done pointing out what's wrong for 40 years, 50 years, 60 years. And that's what I'm supposed to do as a facilitator of learning. So this is contrary to that diametrically, or, the opposite of that, to point out what's right. And when I do that, great case study that Saraswati just shared, boy, did things shift fast. And I can tell you story after story of people that have grown up with the same culture, basically the same culture I have. Doesn't matter whether it's American, by the way, or European, or Asian, or Indian, or African, or any. We all seem to have this philosophy of, you have to point out what's wrong. And I'm here to say and make a statement to the world: you do not have to state what's wrong. You can change that, and the immediacy of what the learner experiences is blinding in the most positive way. They immediately gravitate to being acknowledged and, oh, put me back in, kind of literally, put me back into another experience that I can, let me try it again. Yeah. And it works at all ages. It's worked in all cultures. It's worked at different stages of life. It's worked in all topics that I can imagine. I've had students that are university professors, corporate trainers, adult learning facilitators, grade school teachers, high school teachers, middle school teachers, and on and on and on. And it works. It works because they're working with human beings that are inspired by being acknowledged for what they did well. All right. Any other comments from Sunny or Vivek before I move on here? Just to give you an opportunity to.
Yeah, Peter, am I audible?
You are, Vivek. Go ahead.
Okay, but what I'd like to bring up is probably relevant to this entire page that you have open in front of us, and the focus, of course, being on the facilitator. And I'd like to take us back sometime, was it 10 years or 12 years ago, when, when I had the opportunity of starting this journey with you. And I remember at the time, Aubrey was your co-facilitator.
Oh, yeah.
Was your facilitator.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
There you go. And a wonderful soul. And so here's what here's my thoughts, and that is that we work towards mastery. Some sort of a mastery, or what we like to call mastery. What's really happening is it's in our life to pursue that path, and in this, and the Sanskrit and the Hindi context, they might call it dharam. This is my work to do. Mm-hmm. And we teach most what we need to learn. So, and that's this beautiful thing about mastery, that you can never be done, with it. You're on that path all the time. So the fact that there was this, I mean, we were all novices and kids, for that matter, white hair notwithstanding. But so of course, there's sides of our openness to learn, and I speak at least for myself, if not for that entire large batch that we had. But it's not only just our openness to learn, but I found your openness and Aubrey's openness to be magnificent, magnificently large.
Mm.
And so the aspect of equality was, if I might use some words, it was more like fellow travelers.
Mm.
And it was more like no difference, rather than saying equality, because equality, we might, one way to use the word equality is that we reference inequality and therefore talk about equality. But the other way to use it is the other way to see it is no difference. Mm-hmm. So the aspect of inequality doesn't come up. And that came through very, very, very strong in my 10, 12-year journey with you, Peter.
Thank you.
I think in 10 years, maybe I've missed 2 or 3 classes, in Tuesdays with Peter, but not one otherwise. So there's this consistency. And so we haven't gone into the other areas. I mean, as you'll take us through, over the next few months of the aspect of inspired learning. But I cannot overemphasize the relevance or the role of the facilitator, because while he's a master, part of that mastery is the openness. Because when we come into something, we come in with, okay, I know this, and over time, we learn to unlearn. So to me, that was the most significant aspects of the two of you. And if I picture you and I picture Aubrey, it's like a single soul speaking, from two different faces. Mm-hmm. To me, that was the most remarkable aspect of learning, and I can say that as applied to adult learning, where we come in with a lot of baggage of what we know. And so I really wanted to acknowledge you and Aubrey, and I'll write to him and tell him this, and felicitate this aspect about who the facilitator is, or what I experience, and who you are, and what Aubrey is. And I think I believe that made all the difference to the learning I've had in 12 years, because if I do not remember the content, I can remember the facilitator, and I can remember the facilitator's approach to that. And in that, I take that place, even if I don't remember the content.
Yeah.
So that's powerful, really good stuff, Peter.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a deep topic, actually, that you just went into, as far as the facilitator is the space holder, is the representation of what's possible for the student, and not just a possibility, but we know that the student, the learner, can come into that space and be that. So there's a deep belief in the learner's capacity to learn, and holding that space verbally, attitudinally, energetically, emotionally, that the facilitator has a responsibility in this model, and articulated beautifully by you in terms of that space that you felt, with myself and my co-facilitator Aubrey, which is an incredible human being. and to actually to feel that. We'll talk more about the mindset of the facilitator here in a minute, but there's a sense of holding the learner responsible for their own learning. In other words, there's a book by Carl Rogers. Carl Rogers is mostly known for psychology work back in the 60s, 70s, in the United States. And he had the concept of unconditional positive regard, even though he never said those words, according to the biographers. That's the space that he held, an unconditional positive regard for his clients, for his patients. He also held that it was them, they had the capacity to heal themselves, to get through the trauma or drama of whatever they were dealing with. And he was a space holder for them to do that. And so there is many times people that have studied him, because I had not at all. I had heard his name maybe once or twice in my in business school, but never studied him. And when people would go through our coaches training, as you referred to, Vivek, a number of those people that had studied him said, this is very Rogerian. What the heck is that? I don't know. Very Rogerian. So anyhow, I looked it up. He wrote a book, The Freedom to Learn, is one of his major topics. And as I was reading that book, I felt that I was connected with him in some cosmic way, because he was writing, in this case, decades before I started getting into this inspired learning in the late 90s, middle 90s. And it was like he was inside my head, and I had been using words that he had written down 2 decades earlier. It's like, little kind of Twilight Zone kind of stuff. And it's all the things that you just talked about. How that facilitator shows up, and not a superior manner, but in a knowing the mastery of the topic and holding the space of that these learners already have a lot of this mastery inside of them. They just don't know it. I mean, that's kind of a blunt mindset to have. And I'm here to hold a space for them to discover that. I can create exercises, and we'll get into some more of that in the model. But there's a lot of equanimity, equality between the facilitators holding the space and the people coming into the space to, in many cases, remember more than, learn something new. Yeah. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. All right, so let's move on here. We've got about 15 minutes to go here. Authenticity. We've been kind of dancing around this in the last several shares. Authenticity is by far the most important attribute of the inspired learning facilitator. In their fullness, you provide the space and the permission for each of the inspired learners to flourish. Authenticity. Be yourself. Don't try to be me. Don't try to be, your favorite professor. Be yourself. I have a saying that I love is, you'll never go wrong being your authentic self. It applies to this as much as anything. As a facilitator, do not try to be like anyone else. In fact, when you try to be someone else, you have abandoned the inspired learners and yourself. You've abandoned it. And it's like now you're floating in space. Bottom line is be authentic, be yourself. Can't go wrong. Preparation as a facilitator. Connect with your innate wisdom. This is ongoing basis. This is not just, 2 minutes before the class starts. Schedule private time for yourself to, go within, regenerate, meditate, get centered, whatever terminology you want to use for that. You don't need to be anything else other than yourself. Ask yourself, where is the group? Okay, so if the class has been going on now for 2 days or 3 days or 3 months or, into a year-long program, where is the group at? Kind of check in. So that there is I can show up in the space that will be most helpful to my class, to my group of learners. These sound simple, but it takes a high level of consciousness to do this and to continue doing it consistently throughout a training program. So, I mean, many teachers and educators have students for a whole year. So this applies. In corporate, you may be going through a 6-week program, and this applies. Even if it's for 1 day, where's the group at lunchtime? And do we need to go back? Do we need to kind of check in? Do we need to reiterate some of the principles that aren't quite grasped yet? And so it's a consciousness. Where's my class at this point? Introducing yourself as a facilitator, your inspired learners want to be assured that you care about a couple of things, major things. You care about each of them as unique and capable human beings. And you care about each of them as unique and capable learners in their individual learning journey. If they know that, and they can sense that about how you show up, how you interact, how you respect them as a unique human being, they can drop the shields. They can drop their hesitations. They can drop their hesitant nature of, dare I ask this stupid question? I mean, how many times have I heard that as an educator? This may be a stupid question. There's no questions that are stupid, period. If I've created an atmosphere of laughing at that, I've just destroyed everything that I want to build up. Is trust, is intimacy, is safety. The bottom line, the student wants to know, am I safe to learn here? Am I safe to make mistakes? I mean, the old classic example of, the professor that asked, okay, so who has the answer to this? And somebody in the front row raises their hand and, Sally, yes. And the professor laughs at her and says, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Now, who else would got an idea? Nobody's going to raise their hand. And it sounds obvious, but how can I create more and more safety for the student to show up, experiment? Learning is about experimentation. Let me try this. Oh, that felt pretty good. Not quite there yet, but let me try again. Experiment, try, participate. Get the quiet person that's back in the corner and say, okay, so Henry, we haven't heard a lot from you. Thoughts on the matter or things that you'd like to share? And if you don't want to share, that's okay too. All right, so I'm not trying to force him, but I'm trying to invite him into the conversation of learning. There's probably 1,000 different ways of creating safety. A huge one is going to be the standards of presence that we're going to be talking about. You do not want to miss that talk, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. How do we want to be with each other in this learning journey? How do we make it safe for everybody to participate, to celebrate everybody, and have it be safe for them? Yeah. So I introduce myself in that capacity as best I can. And, you know, I too am on a learning journey of this topic. I am. I really am. I'm still learning stuff about coaching. So however you do that, keep that in mind. The other thing too is speak about your love, passion, personal connection, meaning that you have about this particular topic. I am passionate about learning. Can you tell? I felt like I was battered as a young learner through most of my school years. My most crushing realization was, you know, I was about halfway through high school, struggling. You know, I had to work 5 times harder to get, you know, 1 grade higher than my classmates. I mean, because I was, anyhow, it was not pleasant. And I think that was part of my conditioning, wanting to have a safer, a healthier, more celebratory learning. So if you will, I kind of came in through the world of hard knocks. And I am passionate about having learning be easier, more accelerated, more vibrant than my early days of learning. Now at the stage of life I'm in right now, you can't stop my learning. I am voracious in the things that I am curious about and I learn about and I want to know more about. I could list off 100 topics in the last month that I have explored because of my curiosity to learn more about that particular topic or that particular element of life. So as a facilitator of learning, share that. What's your passion for the topic that you have students in front of you, learners in front of you that want to know more about that particular topic? Now, Inspired Learning Model Facilitator, there are a whole range of competencies. We don't have time to really go through it in this format of, you know, Tuesdays with Peter, but there's an extensive list of specific, demonstratable, and observable competencies that are included at the end of the Inspired Learning Model Handbook. You can get that on Coach for Life's website. Cello, if you want to put that in the chat box, the link that goes to that. The handbook's like $99. Buy it, just buy it. It's 85 pages of brilliance that's worked spectacularly well. Talks about all 7 of these elements that we're going to be talking about in these this 10-week series. At the end of that, there's a whole list of competencies of what a facilitator can develop, can support you to be a better facilitator. Again, as a parent, as a teacher, as an adult educator, doesn't matter. Okay. Number 1 thing, again, in terms of mindset is instead of teaching and telling, it's so much more powerful to be listening, questioning, setting up experiential exercises, eliciting, sharing of insights, acknowledging. If you just followed that one chart, one slide, and brought that into your learning space, your teaching space, your space of learning, you'd have about 80% of what we're going to be talking about for 10 weeks, right there. The one slide. Just memorize that one. All right. I want to get some more time to chat here with Sunny. I haven't had a chance to hear Sunny's expertise and amazingness. Facilitator discovery within a given subject matter. We are not the only ones who have access to the wisdom. Again, this is the concept that the learners are also in a network with me around this subject matter, unknowingly, ethereally, somehow connected to the subject matter. And ultimately, the learners will become the co-facilitators of this subject matter. I'm just reading the last couple of lines here. They have the potential to become co-facilitators of this subject matter in the learning environment. And this could be on day one, by the way. This doesn't have to be, 4 years into medical school or 6 years into learning how to be a professional coach, a master coach. There's something that gets released. There's something that gets nurtured and fertilized, and it starts growing. And there's some amazing things that I have learned from my students, amazing insights that they bring to this work. Next week, we're going to be talking about the subject matter. That's the second element of the model. And I can't believe that I've only got 3 minutes left here. So Sunny, I'm going to get out of this. There we go. Do away with that. Sunny, what did you get? What insight got reinforced for you? What would you like to share?
So this Peter, so I think it's very apt to do this along with coaching. And I was looking at the main focus is that we focus while we are doing with our working with our clients or on coaching is that the person is complete.
Yeah.
And as an example, like I really relate to this definition that poverty or being poor means that there is a lack of something in your consciousness. While it's not about whether there is a lack of money or whether you have money less or more compared to others, till the time you get that lack of consciousness in your mind that I'm lacking in something, that becomes that consciousness, poverty consciousness, or so that's where I think that the moment we kind of focus on the lack, we are reinforcing that poverty consciousness. And that is where, if we just focus on the completeness of the person, um, it just kind of fulfills. And that's where I see in coaching it really works. And you are just allowing people to just be, and that's why, like in India as an example, where a lot of people think that like the village boy will be more happy than a person living in the biggest mansion, and they'll have this smile about them because they don't have that consciousness of lack, while the other would be comparing whatever. And so I think that's where you kind of feed it. But my more interesting thought, what I was thinking around this was that, is it that it's not the society and all which is kind of doing it to us, um, but it is more a function of probably not knowing ourselves. and and I think it's a whole drama in that way of the creator, because if we were all knowing it very well, so I think that's the quest for humanity, that the more we know ourselves and we get to this point of not feeling that lack, or being enabled by people like a coach or a facilitator, and getting to that point, or a parent for that matter, who's just saying, okay, pick up yourself and look at what you have done better. I think we kind of get to know ourselves better, and that's the whole answer probably of life.
Wow. Wow. You've just taken us to a whole new level, Sonny, and I appreciate that. I wish we had another hour that we could explore all of that, because one of the sayings that I know that you have heard from me 100 times is what you focus on expands. So if I focus on what I don't have or what I'm doing wrong, then that seems to grow. But if I'm focusing on what I'm doing right, in the case of learning, as we've talked about this last hour, then that's what accelerates, that's what grows. And the sense of the poverty consciousness, yeah, there's a lot of rich people that have a lot more poverty consciousness than the guy that actually is, and would be classified in poverty or have a whole lot less in terms of, a shelter, a home, etc. So that is the critical fulcrum of inspired learning. Let's focus on what you have learned. Let's focus on what you did do well, as opposed to what you don't know, or you're not doing well. So there you go. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. And thank you for Thank you for being here. Thank you for being an awesome inspired learning facilitator. I am just going to do this. Continue. There we go. So, as I say at the end of each of my sessions, God bless, namaste, be safe, and we'll see you here next week. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being an awesome facilitator. Bye-bye, everybody.